All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live stream today. We'll just start letting people trickle in. If you're here, go ahead and give us a hello. Welcome, you guys. Go ahead and drop a hello in the chat. I see some of you trickling your way in. We'll get started here in just a minute or two. Hi, Chad. Thanks for being here. Hey, James. All right, we'll let people continue coming on in, but we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. So excited for you all to be with us on our Q&A today. I'm really excited to jump into it. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Taylor Schumann. I am the Senior Tech Expert and Editor here at SeniorLiving.Org. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Marianna Matzo. She's amazing. If you were here for our Q&A a few weeks ago, we had a really great conversation just all around aging and caring for loved ones. And today, we're going to be really focusing on managing stress for caregivers and preventing burnout. And, millions of family caregivers are taking care of their loved ones while also juggling family responsibilities and sometimes full-time jobs. And so this is just an incredibly important topic. And a lot of our audience members also requested this as a Q&A topic. So I'm super excited to jump into it. And for those of you who weren't here at our last live session, I just want to give you a little bit of background on Dr. Marianna Matzo. She is a distinguished expert in palliative care and a certified gerontological nurse practitioner with a career dedicated to caring for older adults, improving end-of-life care and education. A retired tenure professor of nursing, she has extensive experience as a hospice and palliative care nurse, researcher, and educator. And since retiring, she's founded Everyone Dies, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating the public regarding serious illness, dying, and bereavement through weekly podcasts, which are amazing, by the way, and a children's book. So welcome, Marianne. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to see you all.
Yeah, of course. So to kick us off, before we get into our Q&A, could you just tell me maybe about your experiences working with or hearing from caregivers and maybe what their biggest issues and concerns are when it comes to, stress and caregiver burnout?
Well, that's a huge question because there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences. I think I would say that the theme that kind of runs across is isolation, and in the case of caring for people, elders with dementia, it's having other people kind of believe what it is that's going on, because I would hear a lot, that they take, the elder to church or to a function or whatever, and people would say afterwards, well, they don't seem as bad as you're saying. They seem to be doing really good, and it's almost they feel like they're living this alternative universe because they're not there. All these other people are not there with them 24/7 like they are. And that, people can have good days and they can have bad days. And sometimes when you're going out for whatever reason, it's sort of like, this is a good day and it looks good. And people sort of treat the caregiver like, no, I think maybe there's something wrong with you, because we can see this person's okay. And then the isolation piece of it is that, you have nobody but your elder to who you're caring for to talk to a lot of times. And again, depending on cognitive status, they may be able to talk to you, they may not. And being alone in that situation, it's very isolating. I know when I was taking care of my mother while she was in hospice, I felt like I was living in Groundhog Day. Like every day was just the same. And because her status didn't change, and the only maybe difference was if somebody came over. But in general, it was like I just really felt like I was in that movie. It was like it's all just starting again, you know?
Mm.
And that repetition, that lack of variety, if you will, can be difficult for people too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and yeah, you have that firsthand experience caring for your mother. And I think, like you were saying, a lot of people don't realize, like, if you're out of the house with that senior loved one, it's probably because they're having a good enough day to be out and about. And all of the hard days are the things that are hidden at home.
Mm.
And other people don't see, all of the difficult days. And so I think anything we can do just to bring awareness to what caregivers are doing, it's such an important job and it's such a stressful job at times. And
Mhm.
yeah, so just educating people on what that looks like, I think, can even help so that there's not as much isolation and feelings of like you're in this alone. So
Or even if you think to yourself, you know, really, Margaret, are you sure you're just, this isn't just you, da 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 da. Maybe put a little stop between your mouth and your brain at that point and say, I'm not there all the time.
mm,
You can say, gee, Margaret, you're doing, such a good job, and he looks so healthy and he's able to socialize, and that's so great. But I know it was a lot of work for you to get here. And have some empathy for that
mm,
situation, and really, what did it take to get out of the house to do that kind of thing, as opposed to looking at that one little snapshot and making a determination.
yeah, absolutely. I think empathy really goes a long way. So that's a great point. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and dive into our Q&A and just we got this like weird little formatting going on. We're going to dive into our Q&A now. And so any questions that you have, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I also have a link here in the QR code. I just wanted to, before we jump in, tell you guys a little bit about Dr. Marianna has a children's book with her nonprofit. It's really amazing. It's all about age-appropriate ways to introduce the impact of the topic of mortality to children. So if that's something you're interested in, I know it's something that we don't talk about very often, or if you're interested in checking out Everyone Dies and her weekly podcast, they are also incredible. So please take a look at those resources. If any questions come up from that along the way, we can chat about those as well. But if you have any questions about caregiver burnout and stress, go ahead and drop them in the comments, and we will look through those. We also have a few questions from that came in before the chat. So I would love to know, what do you think is the best way to differentiate between normal day-to-day stress and signs of burnout?
Well, I think, like probably what your feeling of normal day-to-day stress and what my feeling of normal day-to-day stress are probably two different things. And so I think that for each of us is that how you feel on a sort of day-to-day basis. You know the things that push your buttons, you know how you normally respond to things. And if you notice change, if you notice that somebody says, please pass the salts, and you want to stab them in the heart, it's probably a good indication that maybe there's some burnout going on. Maybe you're
Mm,
overly stressed. Maybe you're not getting enough sleep. Maybe you're feeling the effects of that ongoing caregiving with another another adult. And so those would be sort of a triggers to say, I don't usually jump down people's throats when they ask this, or I don't usually break into tears when I'm talking about going grocery shopping, or I don't usually want to go to bed the 10 minutes after I wake up in the morning. Those are sort of cue into yourself and say, this is different for me. I wonder what's going on. Now, it could be that you're getting sick. It could be, if you're have type 2 diabetes, that your blood sugar is not in good control. It could be that you haven't been eating well or sleeping well, or it could be all of those things, and that the situation that you're in is having a negative effect on your health. Because that's really what burnout is that whatever it is you're doing, if it's your paid job, if it's your caregiving job, whatever it is, when you're feeling like I can't cope with this situation anymore,
Mm.
or I want to run away, or I want to go on vacation and never return, kind of stop and look inside and ask yourself, so what's going on? What's going on here? And sometimes it's like you forgot to take your thyroid medicine this morning. And so, yeah, you're feeling crappy because you didn't have your medicine. If it's, not past 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, then go take it. You'll probably feel better. But if it's an everyday kind of thing and you feel like you're walking through concrete all the time and there's no relief, there's no sense of there's help coming, or there's a change coming, or something is going to make this situation better or change, then you need to evaluate, what is this doing to me? And
Mm.
that's one of the biggest problems that caregivers really have. It Well, there's a lot of issues, and this, you know, adult caregiving is extremely difficult. But it's that sense of, what is ever going to change? And is anything ever going to change? And you feel a commitment, you feel like you owe it to this person, you feel like um, there's a responsibility, or you feel guilty if you don't
Mm.
do it. All of that kind of goes in together and makes you feel like, I'm stuck here. And nobody knows what I do. Nobody appreciates what I do. And I don't want to ask anybody for help, because really, the only person who could do it as well as I do it is me.
Mm.
And that's part of that, fantasy that we get in our heads, is that, what? I've heard this from so many caregivers. It's just too much trouble to try to explain everything to somebody else. It's just easier for me to keep doing it myself.
Mm.
Where the reality is that it takes X amount of time to explain it to somebody, or to write it down, or to have a caregiver guide, or whatever it is that makes you feel comfortable enough to let them stay with that person, so you could go take a nap, or take a bath, or go get a massage, right? Um, all That's a small investment in order to get some relief for your brain, to just relax and rest, to
Mm.
be able to go back into that situation and to keep doing it. And that's hard as caregivers, because people get into the caregiver role for a particular reason. So if it's caring for a spouse, it's like, well, I agreed, for better or for worse, I would be here. And it's one thing if it's a short period of time and you can say, well, okay, this is how long this is that I'm going to make this commitment. But with elder caregiving nowadays, um, people have had the people who are old now that we're taking have had the benefit of good nutrition and medication and all of those things, so that, yes, they have chronic disease now that requires help, but not necessarily help for a short period of time. It could be
Mm.
years and years and years. And sometimes when we get into a caregiving role, we don't know or even acknowledge how long it could be. I had a friend, um, a colleague I was working with, who uh, mother had some dementing illness, and she said, I'm really considering having my mom come live with me. She said, what do you think about that? And I looked at her and I said, how long can you be around your Mom before you guys start arguing or making each other crazy? Because I've heard stories about her mother for years, so I knew. And she said, oh, like 10 minutes. And I said, well, how are you going to live with her? And it just kind of got this silence because the way she was thinking was like, it's my mother, I'm her daughter, it's what I should do. Well, maybe, but we need to realistically look at these things because it's not like when I was a kid and my grandmother got cancer, my mom brought my grandmother to live with us, but grandma, that was a long time ago. People didn't live that long with this disease, and she died after a few weeks. Well, anybody can, I don't know, I think anybody can kind of do anything for a few weeks, but you're talking about 5 or 10 years, that's a whole different scenario. And if you're even thinking about getting into that situation, you really have to ask yourself, can I do this for as long as it's going to be required, or is it better to maybe look at assisted living or something like that to support the elder for that longer period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is so true. I didn't even think about that fact. You just don't know, how long it's going to be a commitment for. And I think a really great question we got from the chat that goes with this of that, if you're taking care of someone and you're on your own, Sherry says, how may caregiver stress and burnout be worse for only children? People that maybe don't have siblings or other family members to assist. And what are some tips for them?
Well, in some way, it might be easier for only children because then you're not annoyed with the other siblings that aren't doing anything. Because I hear those stories a lot. I'm the only one who lives close. But my sister, it's always the sister in California, she can just live her life and do her thing and send, $300 a month and think that that's okay. Like you hear this whole scenario. And so in some ways, you're not dealing with being angry or resentful at siblings who aren't helping. So if you're the only caregiver and it's only you, and you make the decision that I'm going to be this caregiver, I'm going to do this for mom or dad or whoever it is, then you need to go in saying, I'm the only one. And if I'm the only one, what plan B am I going to put into effect now? Who can I get to help with respite care? Somebody to come in and give me a break. Can I afford it? Is there any funding from my church or any place else? Let's just say it's a mom. Does mom have any friends that will come and visit with her so that I can go get my hair cut or go get a pedicure or whatever? Because I don't think we always think about how we can, if we want to go for a massage, we can go do that. If we want to get a pedicure or if we have to stop at the store, we can kind of just do these things. But if you've got somebody who's waiting for you at home, who you're not sure if they're safe for longer than X amount of time, and you're always always thinking about what is she doing? Is she okay? Has she fallen? What's going on? That can really wear you down too. So coming up with a plan before you put yourself into that situation, and I realize I can sound hard-hearted when I say this, that you need to decide if this is the best option for you and whoever you're taking care of. But I've probably seen a lot more of these situations than maybe anybody's ever told you about or you realize of what's involved. Like, and you think, well, I've had kids. I know what it's like. Well, no, it's not the same because that person you're taking care of is not your child. And you can't say, listen, get in that bathtub now. That's the end of it, because this is a parent. You're not parenting them. They're their own adult person. And if they decide that they're not going to ever take a bath, what are you going to do about that? So the dynamic is different. The size of the body that you're taking care of is different. The relationship is different because you've had all those years to either adore and worship the mom that you're now taking care of, or build up resentment toward the person that you're now taking care of.
Mm.
All those dynamics come in when you don't want them and when you least expect them. And so you really need to go into this with your eyes wide open. And so if there's like for Sherry, you're saying, well, some tips for them. My tip would be really think it through before you commit to it, because there are a lot of great assisted living and other kinds of environments, congregate environments, depending on what's going on, that can support that parent without it being a 24/7 on top of everything else kind of experience.
Definitely. I know you mentioned that sometimes there can be that stress of siblings. One of our viewers commented that her sister lives 3 states away, and called the police to check on her mom as she was actually at home with her home healthcare team working with her. And I can't imagine how stressful that would be. And so yeah, maybe sometimes it's nice to be the only kind of cook in the kitchen, but also it's a very big burden. So I love your comment about making a plan and deciding what you actually have bandwidth for. I think just having that plan in place even is a way to reduce feelings of stress, just knowing it's there and you know what steps you'll take.
Mm-hmm.
And you also mentioned sometimes there can be feelings of resentment. Family dynamics are always different and difficult. So one of our viewers, Jeff, says, is it natural for caregivers to feel resentment towards the seniors they care for? And how does one deal with that?
Well, I think that it is natural, because there's this feeling that caregivers can have that they're sort of given up their life for this other person. And, that whole, whose life is it anyway? And how much of your own life are you willing and able to give to this other person? And some people feel like there's no other choice. But I'd really suggest that people really take a look at and say, is there really no other choice? Or have we been socialized to believe, and especially for women, like, oh, you want to have a daughter to take care of you in your old age. It's like, I don't know, is there a worse reason to have a daughter? Like, how do you give birth to another person with an expectation that, and when I get old, you're going to be the person who's going to be there to do that? I think that that's an, I don't want to say old-fashioned way of thinking, but I think it's a very dated way of thinking. Because back in the day, when you could say, well, I have my daughter to take care of me in my old age, the old age wasn't to 105. We need to take a look at the fact, like facts, the reality of, we have this increased life expectancy that we in our country has never been before. The people that are old now have had the benefit of vaccinations, good sanitation, good nutrition, antibiotics, health treatment that made them survive the flu, giving birth, all the things that used to kill people when they were younger, has given them sort of the health to grow old. And the largest group of people growing old in our country are people over the age of 85. So if your mom is 70 or 75 and you're thinking, my mom took care of my grandma when, and that's the least that I can do for her. Is it rude? Maybe it's rude to say, well, but how long did grandma live? Did she live to 100 or even 90? So if she's 70 now till 90, that's another 20 years. Can I do this for 20 years? That's an important question because 20 years is a long time.
Mm.
And if you're 55 or something when you're making this decision, that's 20 years of like really peak time in your life that you look at the data, it's often the caregiver that's sicker and in worse health than the person that they're taking care of.
Mm.
So it's caregiving, adult caregiving is work and it's hard, and you have to be willing to ask for support and take the support and do what you need to do to keep you healthy. And my experience over the last 40 years, and I used to run an Alzheimer's support group for years, um, where the caregivers are coming in for their support group, and I don't want to say I've heard everything, but I've heard an awful lot. And you sit back and you listen and you say, how are they doing it? And then how are you doing it for 20 years?
Mm.
And you got to be honest with yourself. And I think that it's easier to sort of make that decision when mom and dad you know are at the point where they need extra help, is at that point to have a really honest talk with yourself and with your partner and with your priest or whoever, therapist, whoever it is you talk to, and really have an honest talk with yourself and say, am I prepared to do this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? Because once they move into their house and they've gotten rid of all of their stuff and they're in your house, it's a real hard time to say, this is really not going to work.
Mm.
And you got to question yourself, did you really honestly assess for yourself? Or maybe even say, mom, come spend the weekend. Come spend a long weekend. Let's spend 3 days. Let's, kind of see how it goes. Sort of like, when you begin dating, if, sort of like, well, we can go together for a week, go away together for a weekend, and you might find out, yeah, Monday morning, this is over, you know. Um, or you might find, like, yeah, I can tolerate you for 2 days, but we go away for a week on vacation. No, it's not going to work. Gives you some insight in, do you want to marry this person? The relationships, the dynamics, I know they're all different, but it's a sense of all the subtleties that people have that unless you're living with them, you don't know they have.
Mm. Totally. Yeah. And I think, you talk a lot about taking care of yourself, and a lot of times caregivers have a really difficult time with that. We have a few questions from people about that. One from MD says, I struggle with the need for self-care with increased responsibilities of caregiving for an aging parent. Any tips on maintaining a balance?
Well, I think one thing that you could say to yourself is that if we have really good data, and we do, that says that the caregiver is often in worse health than the person they're caring for, if you are in worse health, then you're not going to be able to be a good caregiver for your aging parent. And so it's like with any decision that you make, like if you decide, well, I'm going to go buy that $500 pair of shoes, and then I'm not going to have any money for food for the next 3 weeks. You say to yourself, am I willing to starve for these shoes? Are you willing to not take care of yourself and then not be able to take care of your aging parent? And I think sometimes, like I said, we don't have these really honest conversations with ourselves. We think we're invincible. We think we can do anything. It's sort of the American mindset. It's how we feel. It's like there's nothing I can't do. Until you hit that wall with those responsibilities from aging parent, and you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going for a walk or for a run or eating all your protein during the day or whatever it is, and you feel yourself crash and you realize, I can't take care of this person if I don't take care of this person. And so when you're struggling with it, whatever the piece of it is, if it's getting some exercise or going for a massage or whatever it is that you're saying to yourself, I don't know, I don't really think I have time to do this. The real question I think you need to ask yourself, do you really have time not to do this? Because of the effect that's going to have on the thing that you're saying that you want to do. So it's like how you handle your job or how you handle everything. You've got to look at what's the risk of not doing it or versus the benefit of doing it. And if you put it, I put things into that balance all the time with patients. It's like on this hand you have this, on this hand you have this. Which works better for you? And sometimes just putting it as clearly as that for yourself, you say, all right, I'm going to put my running shoes on and I'm going to go. I'm going to have the neighbor person come sit with mom so that I can do that. Whatever it is that you need to do in order to do the thing to keep you healthy. Because the thing is, you can't, what are all the sayings that they say? You can't drink from an empty well. I don't know what all of them are, but you can't.
Yeah.
And if you don't take care of her yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of your parent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think along with self-care is the importance of, asking for help. And James asks the question, what are some good ways to encourage caregivers who are reluctant to ask for help to take some space for themselves and maybe, ask for that help?
Well, sometimes you need to stop and say to yourself, what's the barrier to my asking for help? If you ask for help, are you feeling like you're admitting you're a failure? Sometimes, depending on how we were brought up and what that dynamic in our home is, and a lot of stuff goes back to that, is that, you know, I'm old enough that, the you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Not that I ever knew what a bootstrap was, but I knew that you had to be self-reliant and do what you needed to do to get things done. That's how I was brought up. So then, do you then make that leap to, well, if I do ask for help, does that mean that I'm a failure and that I'm not capable? Do I feel anxious if I'm asking for help? Do I feel stressed or paralyzed? Does asking for help feel worse than how bad I feel just doing it myself? And then you have to kind of pull yourself back into the reality of the situation. Let those things that you were taught, let them sit over here, and then come back over here and say, all right, here's the reality of my situation. I'm working this many hours, I got this many kids, I've got this, I've got that. And if I don't, or even say to yourself, if I looked at somebody else in this situation, what would I say to them? Would you look at anybody else that you cared about and say, you can do that alone? You're a loser if you can't do that alone. But yet we'll talk to ourselves that way. So instead, talk to yourself like you care about yourself and say, this is a huge undertaking. And the only way that I'm going to be successful with this and come out, as a whole human being and in, relatively good health is to say, I will let you help me. And it might be, because people, the other side of it is, for those of you on the other side of it, is to say, don't say, hey, listen, anything I can do, you just let me know. Don't say that, because they're not going to let you know. They're not. You say, hey, I'm going to the store before you walk out the door. I'm going to the store. How much bread or milk do you need? And then it's sort of like, well, yeah, I could use some milk. And then in that way, it's easier to quiet that voice in your head that says that you're a loser or you're a failure,
Mm.
and let somebody help you. Or you call somebody and you say, I'm going to CVS to pick up my meds. Do you need yours? Do you need your mom's? Need a chocolate bar? Or just buy a chocolate bar and put a little heart on it and leave it in their mailbox. It's hard for some people, to take. And so do it. Leave a casserole on their front porch. Ring the doorbell and run away like, when you were a kid. Leave it there, and it's like, oh my God, somebody cooked for me. Not that you would ever ask anybody, but when they just give it to you, it's the best thing. So I think one of the things I would say is be nicer to yourself. Treat yourself like you treat other people, and let people help. The other thing in terms of if you have trouble asking for help is if you go to a support group online or in person, then you can hear, because what happens when you're in the caregiving situation, you're so isolated in what it is that you're doing that you don't realize that there are hundreds of thousands of other people who are doing the same thing and
Mm.
feeling the same isolation that you do. And so going to a support group allows you to connect and at least feel like there's a lot of other people who are miserable too. That old saying, sound like the old saying, misery loves company. And a support group might be just where you find all those other people who are doing the same thing you are and struggling in the same way that you are. It's not easy.
I love that. And just the reminder of that you're not alone in things, and you're not crazy if you're struggling, or it doesn't make you a bad child. It's just the nature of caring for somebody else is a lot of work, even though it can be really rewarding too. So I love that. James also commented, such a great suggestion. The going to the store idea has really helped us get to know our neighbors. It's a great way just to make people feel seen and to feel appreciated. You gave some really great examples, but do you have any other tips for those of us who aren't caregivers of ways we can offer support or just be more empathetic, or just help those we know who are caring for older loved ones?
I think if you put yourself into their shoes and you say to yourself, if I was doing this, what would I want? Like it might be, I lived in a neighborhood where like the driveways were kind of hilly. And there was this very old couple lived next door to me. And so on garbage day, I would roll, it was really, really a lot of work. I would roll those garbage cans up the hill for them because I had visions as a gerontologist of them toppling over, rolling down the hill, or I tend to think kind of catastrophically of all the bad things that could happen, and I envisioned them all, and so I would roll up their garbage cans up for them, and I don't know if they ever knew who did it. I don't know if they ever appreciated it, but I didn't really care. I did it because I thought, well, that's the right thing to do. The good thing to do is the right thing to do. So if it's a good, if it's a helpful, do it. And you're not doing it so they'll love you, appreciate you, or not holler at you when your dogs are barking. You do it because it's the right thing to do. It's helpful. And so, if you have extra plants, and you knock on the door and say, I've got these extra lilies. Is there where in your yard would you like me to plant them for you? Like, God, don't leave them at the doorstep and expect them to go out and figure out where to plant them and what to do with them. But if you say, hey, I've got these, is there some place where can I put them? I have a neighbor now who just had her 5th baby.
Wow.
And Yeah.
It's
Greatest little kids, but 5.
a
And
lot.
she says, "I just love roses. I love your roses." And last year we had to talk about roses, and I brought my rose food and my clippers, and I clipped them and, did the thing. And when I just saw her new baby, she's like, your roses are so nice.
Mm.
So when I fertilize my roses, I walk across over to her house and I fertilize her roses, put it in, send her a text. Be sure you water those. And it doesn't, I mean, I don't know. She asked the first time. She'll now get her roses, fertilized for the rest of the time that I can walk over there, or until her kids grow up, which, will happen. And that's the thing that's different again about with kids and with elder caregiving, is that that baby in a year will be walking, and in 5 years we'll be doing something else, and in 10 years we'll be in jail or whatever.
We hope not.
But things are going to, they're going to be able to take care of themselves, and there's a developmental thing that you can expect. With elder caregiving, it's not the same. It's you're not saying, well, in a year you'll be walking better, or in a year you won't be incontinent anymore, or in a year you won't have dementia anymore. If it's dementia, in a year it's going to probably be worse than it is now. So it does a whole different thing to our brain to be in this situation where if it's going to change, it's probably not going to be for the better.
Mm.
And that's hard for our brains.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of just, offering things instead of just saying like, "Oh, can I help you at all?" Like just showing up and doing the things. Like I'm sure your neighbors love the trash cans because I hate taking out the trash cans and I'm fully capable. So that's awesome. I love that, of just thinking of what you would want in that situation. That's really great. Um, on another topic, we have a question from safehome.org. Any tech devices that can help lessen the burden of caregiving, like environmental monitoring devices, camera, etc. Any recommendations there?
Well, I think that that's the thing, that if you got any money, I would invest in this stuff, because technology is going to be what's going to help people stay connected to their communities and get the support within the home. And even, if you read the technology journals, they're even talking about like robots as being able to offer companionship and a certain amount of support and supervision. Like you'd say, "Oh, I wish I had another pair of eyes and ears." Well, a robot can do that. So there's lots of technology that is in the development, or a way of being I don't want to say remanufactured, but retooled to do other things. And so to be able to have, like telemedicine, to be able to have the technology in the house where, you can put your arm into the blood pressure cuff, and, it'll take the pulse, and, maybe even take a little bit of blood, and blood sugar and all those kinds of things. Those things are being developed. And so there's, I think, a great deal of hope, and I think a great deal of money to be made in terms of helping with that caregiver role. Like they have these things for dogs that are on a timer, and they'll turn it and they'll release the dog food. Well, they have things like developing things like that with the medicine. It's like, and then it, beeps or says, "George, come in here and take your medicine," and bugs them until they walk in there, and they don't have to, you have to worry about, are they opening the right container? Because right now, we have the plastic things, you have to open the right container. No, it's just right there in the thing. You just take it. Or, these kinds of, safety things within the home. So I really, if I had any money, I think I'd invest it there. Of course, if you lose money on it, you're not allowed to be mad at me. But
We didn't hear from you.
but I really think that that's the thing of the future, is that we have so many people getting old. We have such a long longevity to look forward to because of all those things that I was telling you about, that we don't have money enough to pay the unpaid caregiver. It's like billions a year. I think I wrote it down somewhere. Oh, here's 600 billion a year in unpaid care that's currently happening in the United States. I can't even imagine 600 billion.
Crazy.
So for all the unpaid caregivers, there'd be no way to figure out, well, then how do we pay them? How do we incentivize them? You incentivize by more support and more help. And, and what is it that people are looking for? They're looking for that other level of support, being able to sleep through the night and have something there that will let you know if they've gotten up out of bed. Because a lot of people, I don't sleep really well. I have the baby monitor in there, because what if they get out of bed to try to go to the bathroom and then they fall, and then there's this whole scenario of things that happen and can happen. And so that other pair of eyes, if it's a machine that can squawk, there's even technology now with like what's the tire company that has that guy, and it's all in tires, he's a tire person.
The Michelin Man.
Yeah. So there's this thing, I don't know if it's a jumpsuit or what, but if the person falls, it inflates so that they land on cushioning
Oh my
instead
gosh.
of
I
breaking
haven't seen
something.
that. That's amazing.
Well, these are things that are in development. Yeah, they're not in commercial use yet.
Okay.
But, they
That
will
makes
be.
sense.
That's what I'm saying. Invest, invest, invest.
Yeah.
So these are the things that will let people sleep through the night,
Yeah, I love that. I think one big thing we always talk about at Senior Living is medical alert systems. They, with the press of a button, they offer access to 24/7 response. And there's even mobile apps now where caregivers can be talking back and forth, or you can send reminders to your loved one to take their meds, or that it's time for their doctor's appointment, or whatever it might be. So I know a lot of the caregivers I've spoken with, that gives them a lot of peace of mind, and the senior as well, knowing that if they were to fall or have an emergency, there's help on hand. So I think there's a lot of great tech and new emerging tech too. One of our viewers, Maya, says, my mom set up an Alexa on my grandma's nightstand so my grandma could call her without picking up her phone, and my mom could drop in and check on her more easily. Love this. I think even tools you already have around your house can be repurposed for things like this to help you and your loved ones.
My kids have these monitors. They don't have children yet. This too will pass, but they have monitors with a camera so that they can talk to their dog when
Yes.
they're at work and say, who's mommy's little baby? Da 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 da. Oh, you're such a good girl. So they don't get too lonely. I mean, if you can do that for the dog, you can say, hey, mom, put the candy away or whatever.
Yeah, totally. Oh, so funny. A while ago we chatted a little bit about having other feelings of, guilt, or just kind of these negative emotions that you feel about yourself while caring. And one question that I had was, how can caregivers navigate difficult emotions like grief, resentment, frustration, loss, or just guilt that they're not doing a good enough job while still providing quality care at the same time?
Well, I think that there's a great role for therapy, even if, so depending on who you're caring for. So if you're caring for a parent, there's all kinds of baggage that comes with that. Even the greatest parent in the world, we all goof up, So there's the value in having a therapist that you can say whatever you want to. You can get some feedback from, you can get support from. There's the caregiving stress, the term that we've been using today, is really not the modern term. They're calling it now caregiver role strain.
Mm.
And what they're talking about there are caregivers who are not being paid, typically family, who are caring for an older adult, typically in their home. And there's been some studies, and I was looking at this, and they from one study, it was by Borges. So they looked at people who meet these criteria I just said. 46% reported symptoms of depression, 42% anxiety, 31% physical decline, 23% fatigue, 21% disturbed sleep, and 17% irritability. So I think that, in terms of the support and the programs we develop, and when we look at this and we say, okay, this is what we know they're feeling, how do we address that? What can we offer to address that? And I think one thing is to let people know, here's how people feel. Now, to know that before you go into it, as you're making that decision, I think that that's very logical. While you're doing it, to say, well, 46% of people who do what you're doing are depressed, and they are anxious, and they're not sleeping. And so, for what it's worth, these are normal feelings. And now that, we've normalized it, right? Use the term, we normalize it, then what are we going to do about it? Because once you normalize it, you say, it's not, this is how people in your situation feel, but it's not normal to go through life feeling that way.
Yeah.
And so if that's not what you want for yourself, what are you willing to participate in? What are you willing to do? And then the other piece is, as a society, what are we willing to do? And so the data indicate that what do people need? They need training for what this role is. I can remember going to do a hospice admission, and it was an elder lady, and her elder husband was coming home on hospice. Late in the afternoon, had to call the babysitter. It was a home, family care day. I said, listen, I have to go do this admission. Can you watch the kids for like an extra hour? So I go into this home. I meet this elder man. I meet this elder woman. And she says, oh, I'm just so glad you're here. Would you like to see your room? And I said, excuse me? And she said, well, I know hospice is for him, while he's real sick. And so, I have your room all set up for you to stay in. And I said, did they tell you that the nurse was going to stay here? And she said, well, no, I just thought that's what hospice was. I said, well, here's what hospice is. And I'm not staying here. I'm going to admit your husband. I'm going to talk, you go through the meds and all of this, but then, I do leave. And this, you could just see in her face, like she just got tears in her eyes. She said, I can't move him. And he was way bigger than her. And even though he was in this very frail state, she says, I can't move him. What if he has to go to the bathroom? What if he has to do this? What if he has to do that? And I'm looking at her thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to be home in an hour. Because she didn't know how to roll him over. She didn't know how to do anything. And I don't know, I mean, I don't know what was said when they decided to discharge this man to home hospice with one elder wife caregiver. And so I had to talk through with her, who else is in your family? Who can come and help you? Well, I have my son, but he works full time and he has kids and he's an hour away. And, just had to kind of process through. It's like clearly she couldn't do it alone. Does he stay there? Do we say, well, let's send him to a nursing home? I mean, it was just the biggest mess. And the expectation on this poor woman. So when I say training, that's when first off, let me tell you what you're getting into. Let me explain this. And then once they are in the home, how do you transfer somebody? How do you bathe somebody? How do you do whatever it is that this person is going to need? And then as a society, are we willing to fund respite care? People can get like however many, the rules change all the time. So I don't know if it's, like, is it a day? Is it 2 days? Is it a week? I don't know what it is anymore, but whatever it is, it's not enough. And then financial assistance. People who are working, if you look at the research, either have to cut their hours, lose promotions, some quit their jobs. How do they do this when they're not having money bringing in? And then having accessible mental health care and those support kind of services that are going to help promote well-being and mental health. We don't have enough of those either. And who's going to fund them? And how is the person going to access it? So, you all are saying here in this caregiving role, and you're saying, well, how do I do this and how do I do that? Part of the answer is we don't have a system to support it. If we're going to be honest, we don't have the funding to support it now, let alone as the boomers are getting older and older and older, and whatever care needs might come their way. And so when we say, so what is needed? What do we have to do to support people? I mean, I don't talk politics, but you look at and you say, well, how do these programs get funded? Who are the people that are going to help? Because we know you can't do it alone. So these are sort of the societal issues, all the way down to where we get to the dynamic between the elder that needs the caregiving and the person who's providing it. I don't even remember what the question was.
We went through a lot of topics, but yes, just talking about, handling all of the different emotions of caregiving. And I think a big thing is awareness and as a society making these changes and talking about what can we do, because like you said, we're working in a system that does have a lot of flaws, and it can be really difficult as our aging population grows. And so I think a big thing is if you're looking for support, just remember that you're not alone. Dr. Marianne talked today about so many great tools about, asking for help and about support groups and things like that. And something we have actually similar on SeniorLiving.org that I'd love to share with you guys is the Caregivers Corner. This is our Facebook community that is a place for caregivers to come and share their experiences, come ask questions. We have experts who are regularly in our community answering questions, and you can just talk to other people in the similar situation as you so that you know that you're not alone. And also, we are always here as a resource for you at Senior Living. And so you can check out our upcoming live Q&As with Dr. Marianne, and we have another expert, Dr. Macy, who's going to be talking to us on our next live stream about early signs of dementia. So we have these great events coming up. You can always access them on our YouTube and our Facebook page. And please always feel free to drop comments or questions, upcoming topics you'd like to see, because we're going to keep these going and we would love to offer you the most useful information possible. So thank you for joining today, Dr. Marianne. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been
great.
Yeah,
of course. Thank you so much to everyone that joined today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.